Earlier this year, I wrote an article titled, "No, the Pokémon Company isn't suing Palworld." At the time, that headline was accurate because no lawsuit had been filed, and the developers at Pocketpair were adamant that they hadn't received any legal threats. So anyways, it turns out in my infinite wisdom, I was wrong. Not only did the Pokémon Company and Nintendo take formal legal action, but now we're seeing the results in the form of actual gameplay changes to Palworld itself. Mechanics once central to how the game worked are now being quietly reworked, removed, or even replaced. So, I wanted to revisit this story with a clearer picture of what's going on, what's led to this point, and why it's about much more than just one single lawsuit. This isn't just about Palworld, it's about how the game industry handles imitation, inspiration, legal boundaries, and where the line gets drawn. So, the lawsuit is evolving? Or perhaps maybe it's devolving in this case, because on May 7th, 2025, Pocketpair published a development update outlining two key gameplay changes. Players will no longer throw an item to summon their pals, instead you'll use a radial menu, and the glider, which was previously tied to a specific pal's ability, is now just a regular item. These don't sound like major changes until you read the reason behind them, which says, to prevent interference with future development and distribution. These patch notes aren't about a balance or player feedback, it's legal language. These changes are clearly part of a broader compliance effort in response to the lawsuit filed by Nintendo and the Pokémon Company in late 2024. Pocketpair hasn't commented further, but this kind of wording tends to speak volumes. It marks a turning point in the games industry because Palworld, the game itself, is being reshaped not by its developers' vision, but by legal pressure. To make sense of it all, perhaps it's best to go back to the beginning of these legal proceedings. In September 2024, Nintendo and the Pokémon Company filed a lawsuit in Tokyo against Pocketpair. What made headlines wasn't just the lawsuit itself, but the angle they chose, and surprisingly, it wasn't about Palworld's characters or art style. Instead, the focus was on gameplay mechanics, particularly the use of throwing an item to summon a creature or capture it, mounting and riding creatures into battle or traversal, and systems that allowed for either capturing or engaging creatures in combat. These mechanics are core to both Pokémon and Palworld, and it seems like Nintendo's legal team argued that Pocketpair's implementations were a little too close for comfort. Pocketpair responded by pointing to similar systems in other titles like Tomb Raider, Titanfall 2, Pikmin 3, and more as proof these ideas weren't exclusive. Yet still, they've already begun altering these core gameplay systems. Whether that's an admission of infringement on Pocketpair's behalf or a move to avoid a prolonged legal battle, the message is clear: Nintendo really isn't messing around. A big question is, why didn't they go after the characters? Well, when the lawsuit became public, many fans expected it to focus on the creature designs. After all, the comparisons between Pokemon and certain pals were immediate and widespread, but the character designs weren't the focus, at least not in court. So why not? Nintendo, like many developers, hold patents for specific gameplay systems. These patents describe how something works. For example, capturing creatures via thrown objects or systems involving battle transitions. Because patents are technical and detailed, they're generally more straightforward to defend in court. Copyright, which protects original artwork and character designs, works a little differently, and it only covers how something is expressed, but not the idea itself. So unless a PAL is a near identical copy of a Pokemon, it's very difficult to prove an infringement. From a legal strategy perspective, going after the gameplay made more sense because it's easier to enforce and a stronger argument for the courts. Why does this lawsuit matter? Well, because it's not just about Palworld. It's about how we handle ideas in game design and what happens when the lines between inspiration and imitation blur. Patents can stifle creativity. Take Warner Bros. Nemesis system from Shadow of Mordor. Launched in 2014, the system was praised for adding personality to enemies and creating dynamic rivalries. But Warner Bros. Patented it, and no other studio has legally been able to recreate it. The result? A promising innovation that never became an industry staple, even more so now with Monolith being shut down. Some ideas are stronger when shared. Consider the rewind mechanics in racing games. It was first popularized in Race Driver Grid in 2008, but rewind has now become standard across many racing franchises. Even in my most recent review of MotoGP 25, I noted that rewind is now almost an expected feature in modern racing sims, because it's not really a gimmick, it's a feature that improves accessibility and fairness. The difference? No one really patented it or locked it down, and as a result, it is spread and evolved, benefiting a whole genre. But on the other hand, originality still wins when it works. Games like Balatro show what can happen when developers push into new territory. Its bizarre blend of roguelike structure and poker mechanics felt fresh, risky, and unlike anything else, and it resonated with players. And I think that's a reason why indie games tend to do something weird or unexpected, and they often punch above their weight, and they break out because they stand apart. Of course, that doesn't mean every game needs to reinvent the wheel, but it does show that creativity isn't just about combining ideas, it's also about taking risks. Are Nintendo the bad guys? Well, a large part of the gaming community certainly seem to think so. Ever since the lawsuit was revealed, fans accused Nintendo of overreacting, and to be fair, the company has a long history of firm legal action, from shutting down fan games to striking out YouTube content. But in reality, this situation really isn't as black and white as it seems. The phrase Pokémon with guns became shorthand for Palworld, drawing the ire of Nintendo, who just want to protect the Pokémon family-friendly feel. This moniker actually wasn't a marketing phrase coined by Pocketpair, it came from early previews, memes, and player chatter. Journalists ran with it and players adopted it, and Pocketpair, wisely or not, didn't really fight it early on. They did later clarify that they tried to move away from the label, not just because of the legal risk, but because they didn't want players to assume that the game was just a gimmick. That said, those comparisons helped sell the game, and Palworld moved nearly 12 million copies in its first month and topped the Steam charts. Whether or not the devs intended it, the association worked. So, while it's tempting to paint Nintendo as the villain, the situation is a little more complicated, and Palworld drew close inspirations from the Pokémon franchise, and many of those inspirations helped shift copies. What's next? The lawsuit's still ongoing, so most of it will happen behind closed doors, but the changes to Palworld show that Pocketpair is taking it seriously. Whether there's been some sort of settlement or agreement, or just cautious compliant, it's still unclear, but the outcome is already shaping the game's future. The bigger questions to ask are really, what does it mean for the industry as a whole? Should gameplay mechanics be treated like inventions and locked behind patents and licenses? Should games that imitate be punished or applauded for remixing old ideas in new ways? And if the most successful ideas get legally protected, what happens to the developers that can't afford a legal team? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're becoming more frequently asked as games get more ambitious. When I first covered this story, I genuinely just didn't think a lawsuit was coming, and I wasn't alone. Many people, even legal experts, weighed in, saying it was posturing rather than real risk. Clearly, things have changed. While this outcome may still be unfolding, one thing is clear. Legal pressure can shape how a game evolves just as much as community feedback or creative vision. I have no doubt Palworld will survive this intact. It may even thrive with all the extra attention. But the industry's approach to gameplay ownership won't be the same after this. So I'll leave you with one question to think about. Is this lawsuit protecting creativity or suppressing it? Thanks for watching. Thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked it, the best way you can support What's It Like is by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends. For more reviews, click on the thumbnails to the right, and for everything Nintendo, check out whatsitlike.com.au.